comprehensible input is that it should be personalized whenever possible. For example, let's say you're teaching your level 1 class the vocabulary for different members in a family. If this is a Spanish 1 class, you could even present the material in a culturally authentic way by discussing the royal family of Spain. For this comprehensible input, the teacher might say something like, Prince Felipe has 2 sisters. Here it is. His sisters are Elena and Cristina. He has 2 sisters. He does not have any brothers. And I'm emphasizing the new vocabulary here, sisters, brothers. Although this is a great way to start comprehensible input with lots of repetition, visuals, we've got culture embedded here, it is not personalized yet. So instead you might choose to say, class, after you've done that, class, raise your hand if you have a sister. Raise your hand if you have a brother. And then you might say to an individual student, how many brothers and sisters do you have? And so now you've taken this material, which is culturally authentic, repeating the vocabulary, and now you've personalized it to them. Again, it may not always be possible to personalize the new content during the comprehensible input. This may come at a later stage of the EIS, perhaps guided practice or independent practice. However, at some point, if you can connect the material to the students so that they can make connections to their own lives, they will remember it better and longer. Another characteristic of comprehensible input is that it needs to be coherent. In other words, what students study in one chapter should, in some way, connect to the next chapter. Here is a bad example. Class. Last week, we worked on how to talk about items in the classroom and what materials we need for school. This week, we'll learn how to talk about shopping for clothes. This choppy transition from one topic to another is like a chain with a broken link. It's often what my textbook does. But here's a better way to provide coherency among chapters, even when you're stuck with a book that does this. So here's another way. Last week, we worked on how to talk about items in the classroom and what materials we need for school. This week, we'll learn how to talk about clothes we wear to school, such as uniforms or dress codes, and then compare and contrast them to the target culture, and how to shop for them. So these, as you can see, the chain here, now the links in the chain are hooked together. Synapses in the brain are forming for our students. It's a wonderful thing. But note, as I said earlier, that sometimes our textbook does this for us. However, if it does not make the connection between chapters, we need to do it for our students. A final characteristic of comprehensible input is that it needs to incorporate frequent checks for understanding. These checks for understanding help us to know what our students are, help us to know that our students are, 1, paying attention and not drooling on our desks, and 2, they give us feedback as to whether or not they are understanding the new material, or if they need more visuals, more repetition, more gestures, cognates to help them understand. Checks for understanding in the comprehensible input in this stage of the EIS, they do not require much production from the part of the students. Here are the 3 basic checks that should be used in this order, if possible, and they're in order from easiest to hardest. First is the yes-no response. Second is an either-or response, and third is a what is it response, as we discussed a little earlier. You will watch all of these examples done in some videos later on in this module, but here is kind of an idea. Once again, let's say the teacher is introducing new clothing items, a hat, a scarf, and a jacket. So, as I did this earlier, I might have these 3 pictures up on the whiteboard. Maybe I'm holding these 3 items in front of the students. Let's say I'm doing the latter there, so I pick up the hat and I say, this is a hat, this is a brown hat. I might put the hat on my head and say, I like the hat. And then I put the hat down and pick up a scarf and say, this is a scarf. I like to wear the scarf when it's cold. The scarf is red. I like the scarf. the hat, oh, and then I go back to the hat and point to that, and I go back and forth, and then I add the jacket and say, oh, the blue jacket. I love to wear my blue jacket when it's snowing. I love to wear my blue jacket and my red scarf when I'm cold. Blue jacket and scarf. And, oh, my hat. This is my hat. And so repeating the vocabulary back and forth, picking up the different items, and talking to the students about these 3 items. And then after a couple minutes, I would pick up a hat and say to the class, is this a scarf? And hopefully they would say no. And I'd say, oh, is this a hat? Yes. And then I might pick up the scarf and say, is this a jacket? And the students would say no. Oh, is this a hat? No. Is this a scarf? Yes. And then at some point I'd pick up the hat or the scarf or the jacket and say, for example, if I'm holding the jacket, is this a jacket or a scarf? And the students with that either or question, hopefully by then will answer jacket. And then after I've done that several times, I'd get to the third way to check for understanding, which is what is it? So I might pick up the scarf and say, class, what is this? And they'll tell me a scarf, hopefully. So I hope that made sense, and you will be watching these in videos in later sections of this module. Again, remember that this is all being done in your target language. Even though for my examples here I was doing this in English for you, I would be doing this in the target language for my class. Now, there is a large range of ways to do comprehensible input in your classroom. What we discussed earlier back here, they were characteristics of comprehensible input, but these are some examples of comprehensible input. All of them include the kind of teacher talk with lots of cognates and repetition. But here's a list of ways to do comprehensible input. As I was saying, you could just use pictures, art, photos, drawings, videos, transparencies, anything you put up on the whiteboard. You might use props or realia. As I was saying, maybe you brought a suitcase full of clothes to school, you're going to travel on a trip, so you're holding up the different clothing items, talking about what you're going to pack for your trip. You could use real people. You can get students to come up front, and let's say you're discussing eye color, hair color, physical description. You can have the students stand in front. You could talk about what their hair looks like and have introduce the new material that way. You can use something called TPR, Total Physical Response, in which, for example, if you're doing sports and you're teaching sports vocabulary, basketball and golf, you can have the students act out the words as you say it. You can use manipulatives, different types of manipulatives. Sometimes I'll just use pieces of paper and I'll cut them up and I'll give them to the students, and I'll tell them a story and have them put the pictures in the sequence of the story I'm telling it in. Let's see. Again, storylines. You might have them draw something while you're presenting to keep them focused. You might do a mini drama using just your voice and puppets or dolls, and of course your wonderful acting. You could do a demonstration. Let's say it's the beginning of a food unit. You could do a comprehensible input in which you are preparing an authentic dish for the students, and as you prepare the dish, you hold the items that you're about to put into it and say what it is. You know, this is a pepper, this is an onion, this is a tomato as you're making the dish. And or you could show them how to make an authentic craft, and maybe they're learning how to do informal or formal commands, for example, and you want to use that as your comprehensible input. And music, songs can also be used as a way of comprehensible input. There's a song I like to do with, prepositions such as in front, behind, on top, below, beside. So you can have them act those things out and sing them along with you. And finally, you can also use authentic readings. Menus, travel brochures as forms of comprehensible input. This list is not exhaustive, and in the videos you will watch in the future assignments of this module, you will see a variety of these forms of comprehensible input. If any of the above are unclear, feel free to email an instructor or post a question on the discussion board. And if you can think of any other types of comprehensible input that maybe you use in your classroom or you have seen used, please don't be afraid to post those on the discussion board as well. That concludes this part of the module. Thank you.